Hi everybody, this is Tim at Makers Machining here again at the machine shop this time. Last week we were at the pattern shop and talked with Bert and Art here about making patterns, and right now we're kind of doing an end around on these guys. They're experts on patterns and we're doing machining on some castings, so we're going to have them take a look at some of these pump castings to see what they think about how the castings were made or how the patterns were made to make the castings. We've got the basic parts here, a pump impeller that pushes the liquid through the pump into the whatever outgoing tube they have. Here's the bottom casting. It's got a couple little feet on it here, if you can see that. A couple of feet. We've machined those flat. This casting will sit in the bottom of a tank, and the feet on there will allow the liquid in the tank to come up through to where the impeller is turning, and then the pump itself, where the impeller is, it's an eccentric opening that allows the fluid to be forced and go into where the pocket over here is captivated by the top of the casting. Keep in mind the impeller is in there, but that liquid will come and pump itself out and up a tube to whatever the application is needed for pumping to. The size of the impeller, the size of the fins on the impeller, or vanes, or however you want to call it, will determine how much flow and volume is pumped through the pump. And also the tube that comes up, that's the riser, or I think you could call it maybe the head pressure or the head volume on the pump, is determined how much liquid you can get out of that by the RPM, the horsepower, the size of the impeller, and everything. But anyhow, I'm going to have Bert and Art take a look at these things here. They didn't make the patterns for these particular parts here, but maybe talk about how some of these patterns would have been made to make these castings. Now, the missing ingredient here, we got the pattern makers and we got the machine shop. In between there, we need the guys to make the mold out of sand. We talked about that on our previous videos. Make the mold in boxes with sand, and then the foundry will pour the molten metal into the mold to yield these castings. And as you can see here, if you look at this thing here, this casting is really a rough, crude material, but when you machine it, there's no pits or bubbles in there or anything. It's really a nice condensed material that's in there. But the foundry makes these patterns. The pumps are different material for whatever the application is. They're stainless steel pumps. These here are 28% chromium, which is high nickel, for wear resistance for caustic materials that they pump. Anything that's used out there, it's hard to go back to the basic manufacturing processes to know what materials are used in products that we use in everyday life, whether it's chemical ingredients or whatever. But each pump has its own use for whatever product they're pumping, and the casting has to be made out of material that will be impervious to wear and tear on the product. Liquids, hot liquids, whatever. But anyhow, you guys take a look at these things here. We've got this impeller. This thing, the foundry has cast this thing. There was a line in here, so this is probably a split pattern.
Right. Well,
two
yes,
halves.
Yes. And what you see here, the shiny part, is where the gate
The filling
was attached for the hot metal to roll into the
they fill the metal
mold.
into the mold, so
Then
it
they cut it off
fills
and
the
grind
cavity.
it.
Do you think that was done in an orientation like this or like this, where
Yeah.
it would maybe come in and go to the side?
Right. It was laying flat like
Okay.
this, and the metal came in from the
Yeah, it
side.
looks like it might have come in here as well.
Could be. They sometimes feed them from both sides.
Yeah. It's hard to say if there's vents, because when you have material coming in, air has to escape. Air and gas, I guess you'd say that is. So, yeah, it's a nice clean casting. We machine it, then we bore it out and put a keyway in there so it can be driven. There's a shaft that goes through this thing and turns the impeller to pump the material. So, how much time we got in there, Tom?
4:40.
Okay. So anyhow, we got a couple minutes here to talk about the casting. This here, like I said, it's got the feet on the bottom. You can see all the different configurations on here. If you look at the casting, it's got a little bit of an angle. We didn't talk about that in our previous video about draft angles. when you make a pattern, you need to have a couple degrees angle on there, so when you try to take the pattern out, it comes loose immediately from the sand instead of dragging out. If it was a flat surface, you could risk damaging your mold body or mold opening because you can tear the sand away. So there's a draft angle on all these things. You were saying about on this thing here, this is maybe the risers or the gates there as well?
Well, these would have been risers because they're big, they're large. And what a riser is part of the gating where they'll pour material into the cavity, and they want extra material with a little extra pressure, like say from gravity, that can continue to feed the mold so that you don't end up with a blank spot or a big void in the casting. These could be vents.
Okay.
But I would
they've been ground off after they've made the casting.
Right.
And it's cooled off, and they've knocked the sand away from it. Then they do a little finish work on
Right.
it. So that's done here. They got some identifying numbers in there for the part number. Here's the inside shape. We have to still machine this pad to maintain the dimension from here to here. So the efficiency of the pump is held by not too much clearance, because you want to have as much material pumping out and up your riser by the impeller as possible. See, that fits in there like that. Right now we probably got about 40 thousandths to take out of there. Right now this is sticking up above there.
For here.
Yeah, there's 25 or 30 thousandths clearance between top and bottom. So, now here's probably the more intricate of the whole batch of castings. And we were talking about, this is probably made sitting on a flat board,
Right.
and then everything was above the board. And then what did you have? What do you think is in there?
Okay, this is what we call a flat back pattern, in the fact that there is nothing on this side. It's just a flat surface. So that makes it easier in the fact that the pattern is made just like this, and it'll sit on a board. Then you have to have a cores to pour out this area, because you can see if sand got trapped in there, which it would, you'd never get the pattern out of the mold. So they have to put a core print around here, and you can see this line right here is the core print came out and went down.
Yeah, right.
And that was the edge of the core print, and the core print went all the way around.
These openings are there so the liquid can get into the inside of the pump where the impeller is. So there's another big pipe on here that kind of shrouds around the shaft that turns the impeller. But anyhow, so this is a pretty basic casting, but the cores that would be used in here, I wish I had the patterns to show you with these, but that's at the Foundry. But this is a big rough and tumble casting here, and the pattern maker has quite a job. You can, I don't know if you can see it here, but all these slots here for the screws, there's the screws that clamp these two halves together. There's a little angle on there, and that's that draft angle we were talking about to help get the pattern out of the mold, out of the sand.
In other words, there's a bigger gap here at the top than there is at the bottom.
Exactly right.
So it's coming out on angles like that.
Yep.
And then this is what the core box is coring out, so that all of this detail is in the core box.
Okay, I hope that gets you a good explanation here on what these things are. So we'll leave these down here. We're going to sign off for now. We'll be making another video with some of the guys here in the machine shop watching the videos from last week. Talk to you soon.